It was a standard, uneventful afternoon in our physics class. However, since it was a Friday during the 7th period, the academic week was nearing its conclusion, and the eagerly awaited spring vacation was just around the corner. Consequently, everyone in the room was becoming noticeably restless. I knew we weren't scheduled for an examination that day, unlike many of my peers in other classes with their instructors. Our teacher, being quite relaxed, opted to initiate some online quizzes on Quizlet.com right in the middle of the session. He had a very casual approach to teaching. While engaged in a task identifying various brand logos on Quizlet, I recall the precise instant it happened. Immediately after a friend provided an answer, I distinctly remember the correct response was Puma. The voice of the principal resonated through the internal speaker system. His tone conveyed alarm and agitation as he urgently informed all faculty members that this was a genuine emergency, and they were to initiate lockdown procedures. I distinctly felt a shiver run down my spine, and my arms broke out in goosebumps as our typically easygoing instructor also appeared panicked. He quickly moved to extinguish the lights and directed us to the rear corner of the room. We all remained silent for approximately 2 minutes. Then the familiar low hum originating from an electrical panel at the back of the space ceased, indicating that the school's power supply had likely been interrupted. We exchanged glances, recognizing the seriousness of the situation. After a few more minutes of anxious waiting, we heard a male voice screaming at the top of its lungs approaching down the corridor. 2 young women in the class began to cry, which intensified the fear felt by everyone. As the screaming drew nearer to our classroom, the man, sounding completely unhinged, started pounding violently on the locker doors while shouting threats like, "I'll kill everyone." It was at that particular moment that I started to genuinely fear for my personal safety. Our instructor motioned for us to be quiet as we all looked around at our classmates' reactions. The loud banging then shifted from the lockers to our own classroom door. That's when one of the girls who had been crying suddenly screamed, "No!" The pounding on the door intensified as the man began yelling, "Open up!" By this point, 2 of the girls in the class were audibly sobbing. It felt like an endless period of time that the man was hammering on the door, but eventually he moved on down the hallway, continuing his deranged shouting until we could no longer hear him. I'd estimate around 10 minutes passed after that, though it seemed much longer given the circumstances before the principal returned to the loudspeaker. He provided an explanation for what had occurred, which was unusual for him to do. He clarified that an apparently unstable individual had entered the building and assaulted the woman working at the reception desk, prompting her to flee the premises while screaming. School staff were unsure if the individual was carrying a weapon. This incident occurred before the school had installed surveillance cameras or could afford robust security personnel, leaving the building quite vulnerable to such an event. The staff had conducted a thorough search of all corridors and classrooms but were unable to locate the man. Therefore, the principal instructed teachers to resume instruction but emphasized keeping all doors secured and not permitting any students to exit the rooms for any purpose. The most unsettling part of the incident, however, was that a night shift custodian later discovered the man asleep in a utility closet located toward the back of the school building. According to stories circulated among my peers, a large caliber handgun was reportedly visible protruding from his pocket. The custodian must have done something ill-advised to rouse him, perhaps leaving the closet door ajar, because by the time a law enforcement officer arrived on the scene, the man was gone. As far as I know, my entire class remains unaware to this day if this individual was ever apprehended, but I prefer to believe that he is currently receiving the necessary assistance he needs. My school operates with 2 distinct lunch periods. The initial lunch session is designated for all 6th graders and a portion of the 7th grade class. The subsequent lunch period accommodates the remaining 7th graders and all 8th graders. The safety alert took place early in November. On the specific day of the lockdown, the weather was chilly and gray. During the first lunch period, I distinctly heard several sharp, loud noises. Personally, I initially assumed it was thunder, but the entire student body in the cafeteria immediately erupted in screams. I thought those kids were being overly dramatic, frankly, but then school safety officers entered the area and began shouting directives for everyone to proceed into the auditorium. Students who were standing in line to purchase food were instructed to discard their lunches and move indoors. My friends and I, along with a substantial crowd of other students, entered the room. Everyone was curious about what was happening. Our auditorium is quite spacious, and the rear wall is composed of large window panes. As my friends and I were hurried inside, the school safety personnel were busy pulling curtains across the windows, and adults were positioned at every exit point. My friend Mike was just as inquisitive as the rest of us, so he approached one of the adults to inquire about the situation. When he returned, he mentioned, "You know those residences situated directly across from TMS?" I confirmed, "Yeah?" He explained, "Well, there's this unstable man over there who has barricaded himself in front of his residence and is threatening to end his life and harm the police if they attempt to evict him. He was apparently pacing near the school grounds, observing the students in a peculiar manner," Mike informed us. It later emerged that the man was also a convicted offender, compounding the gravity of the situation. We remained confined to the auditorium for a full hour, which effectively consumed 2 class periods. After the situation was resolved, we were escorted back to our respective classrooms in a staggered manner. I subsequently learned that the man resides adjacent to my friend Sarah's house. Sarah recounted an incident from the previous Halloween when she observed the same man at his window, apparently cutting his arm and writing phrases like, "Keep away or I'll harm you," on the glass with his own blood. Naturally, given that it was Halloween, people, including Sarah, simply assumed it was part of a seasonal display. However, following this alarming event, we understood that this individual was mentally disturbed, and we were relieved that he never managed to get close to us. I am now 22 years old, having recently completed my university studies, and I've secured a position at my former high school working as a kind of IT assistant in the school's lower level. This basement area is quite cluttered and lacks organization, but it does contain a small workspace designed for 3 people that is surprisingly well appointed. It features 3 decent-sized desks, 2 small chillers, a display panel mounted on the wall, and wonderfully satisfying air conditioning, a comfort the students and teaching staff upstairs don't get to experience. And of course, it houses all the school's main servers and other computer equipment. I obtained this job primarily because 3 of my former computer instructors had been exceptionally fond of me. I genuinely consider them more like close acquaintances than just teachers, so they provided significant support in helping me secure this role. Things had been going smoothly until an incident that took place a few weeks ago. My 2 colleagues who share the office space with me, Chris and Mark, were not present at the time. They were upstairs attending to some paperwork or similar tasks. I was consuming my sandwich during my lunch interval when I received a telephone call from one of the administrators in the main office. She informed me that the school was initiating a lockdown procedure as someone, possibly armed, had entered the building. There wasn't much I could do from my location other than switch off the lights because despite how pleasant this small office area was, it lacked a proper door, just a wide opening. Furthermore, the door providing access to the entire lower level didn't have a functional lock. For my own safety, I did turn off all the lights in the office and shut down my computer display. I kept my phone on the desk, sending texts to both Chris and Mark, but neither responded. I remained there in the darkness, engaging in games on my phone for approximately 20 minutes, awaiting the call from upstairs to confirm it was safe to resume work. I had no knowledge of what was unfolding. I couldn't hear anything happening on the upper floors from down here, but I was prohibited from making any outbound calls until I was officially notified that the lockdown had concluded. Then the noisy lower-level door opened, and its creaking resonated across the basement area and into my office. I sat up from my chair, debating whether I should call out for Chris or Mark. I was eager to get some information from them. Someone then came rushing down the stairwell, and their footsteps were rapidly approaching my office. I pushed my chair away and concealed myself beneath my desk. The individual entered the office but did not activate the lights. There was just a profound silence. I cannot adequately describe the level of fear I was experiencing. I felt as though making any sudden noise would inevitably result in my death. Suddenly, my phone chimed as I received a text message. I felt my entire being seize up in that single instant as I clenched my jaw in terror. Footsteps abruptly moved closer to my location until, in surrender, I finally lunged out from under the desk, pleading with whoever it was not to harm me. Just at that moment, someone seized my arm and helped me stand up. It was a man wearing a blue-checked shirt, jeans, and a dark-colored hat. He reassuringly told me, "It's all right. I'm just hiding down here with you." "What's happening upstairs?" I whispered back to him. He seemed to disregard my question and instead asked if there was an alternative exit from down here. I informed him, "Yes, that way," indicating the direction. Before he could react further, I asked him, "Who are you?" There was a brief pause before he began to explain. He had come to pick up his son when a teacher instructed him to conceal himself. Following his explanation, I checked my phone and saw the text message I had received was from Chris. It read, "Buddy, this is nuts. Some guy with a weapon shot Mr. Henderson. He's wearing a blue shirt and a hat. Whatever you do, stay upstairs." I was about to read that text message aloud to the man standing before me when I suddenly realized the significance. I looked up at him and my stomach plummeted. The man seemed to detect my suspicious gaze and began to panic. All I could think to do was make a desperate run for the upstairs. A gunshot echoed through the lower level, and I could hear the bullet ricochet off something concrete in the darkness, but thankfully, the shot missed me and I reached the upper floor. Fortunately, law enforcement officers were positioned at all exit points, including the basement exit, and apprehended the man the moment he emerged. More positively, our instructor, Mr. Henderson, survived the gunshot wound. It was later determined that the man and Mr. Henderson had some form of long-standing conflict for reasons that were never fully disclosed. All we know is that Mr. Henderson couldn't have possibly done anything that would justify this level of retaliation. And I know the sound of that gunshot will forever reverberate in my memory.